Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us on this episode of the Pave It Forward Podcast. My name is Phil Metzger, and with me is Kevin Gray, and we are here to help leaders in the paving industry who are looking to run more efficiently, meet their ideal customer, and improve the lives of those around them through meaningful work. Kevin, how are we today, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Nice. Yeah, me too.
Good to be here. Glad to see your smiling face. Ready to rip another episode, man.
Yeah, I hear
Giving
that.
the people what they want, right?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. This topic was pretty interesting, and I actually started on a different topic, and as I did more research, it just kind of evolved into something different. But I thought as far as the community out there that we get to interact with online, most of it is across the United States. They're in different kind of regions, and given some other context that just kind of got thrown in there, it just kind of got me on this trail that, what is the best place in the United States to kind of own and operate a paving business? And that is just from the aspect of, things like the most workable days. I think that is what actually got me started, is if, a company in the Northeast has, 6 months to really work, how does that work? And, what factors are there kind of in there that contribute to maybe a business owner there having more or less success? And then kind of the opposite of that, what are the kind of areas of the country that may find it a bit easier for whatever reason? And it really just kind of sent me off on a hunt for some data. And there were just a few data points that I thought were pretty interesting that we'll throw in here. But I decided to kind of approach this from a hypothetical. If you could, if you were not held by any limits, you wanted to stay in the United States, but you could travel and kind of be anywhere and choose to start an asphalt paving company, where might that be? And what are the greatest chances of those places, that business being profitable and successful? So if that were your goal, Kevin, you were going to pick up and move, no strings attached, what are some factors that you might consider when choosing a place within the United States to start an asphalt paving company?
Well, the easy answer is somewhere where it's warm, sunny, dry. The sun shines 20 out of 24 hours out of the day. Give me all the climate's a huge factor. And then I would say, give me somewhere where I do have access to resources, trucking, material, suppliers, equipment, and that the market isn't entirely oversaturated. So, and that's becoming harder and harder to find all the time, because there are a lot of people in our industry, and man, what blew me away was just being out of the asphalt paving, pavement maintenance space and I wasn't even entirely out of the space, but just wasn't as engaged or in tune over the past year. How many companies just in our market alone had entered and or exited the market? Just that when we put ourselves back out on Google for the first time as a new company, and when you get pushed down to the bottom as a startup, basically, and you got to go through the list, there's companies in there I'd never even heard of, and there were some missing there. I'm like, where did they go? So it's quite interesting, man. Just to look with inside your own market to see what's happening on a year-to-year basis sometimes. So I think this is a cool topic to dive into, one that probably doesn't get talked about a lot, but absolutely can incite some good conversations, some good questions, some good, let's look at some data, things like that. So I
Yeah.
think this is fun, man.
And also, and looking at all these different factors that kind of popped up as far as not only the weather, but like the market saturation and things like that, I assumed that there would be a lot of information available, about exactly how many there are in the market. Maybe like the U.S. Census Bureau had some information, and of course there were some websites that had some information you could pay a couple grand for, get into it. But when it came down to it, I was really kind of surprised at the lack of information, and there was also a diversity of information. But when it came down to really researching what are the factors that matter and what might benefit, there were a few things that kept popping up. One, weather and climate, of course. The second one was local and state budgets. The overall economy of the area has everything to do with it, and the overall rate of construction. Now, there are obviously asphalt is an industry that has a lot of maintenance requests. It is an industry that is needed for repeat business. It's not a one and done type thing. So if a city already has infrastructure, especially those brands and those companies who have established themselves as being able to handle that kind of work and be reliable in that manner, that is something to consider as well. But I had not, uh, especially coming from those government jobs, thought about the local and state budgets as far as just overall kind of metric there to measure.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I mean, even if you're a private contractor like we are, and a lot of unless you own your own plant and your own plant trucking, and a lot of times even earthwork now, the people that are involved with these locals, local, county, city, state, federal projects. Um, even when you're in the private market, you can follow the trend of where that work is being done because that's usually an indicator of how well the economy is or isn't going in that part of the country, or in that even sometimes cities inside of states. Where is the growth, where is the development, where are the homes being built, where are the new grocery stores going up? That usually lends to tell us private contractors, well, that community or county or state has got some economic boom going on, or it's at least it's thriving to where it's able to put some money towards state and local and federal projects. That usually is an indicator that the private work is going to be there as well. So it's almost kind of, if I just thought of this, but it's like if you're fishing, like kind of where all the big predatory fish are, your sharks and the big fish of the sea, the tuna, whatever. Like there's always this small fish lingering around too, the bait fish, whatever you want to call it. So it's kind of, and you got the birds flying in on top of the water because that's where the activity is. So it's like if you can find those pockets of the sea, if you will, that's usually where some things are happening. You can make a splash, no pun intended.
There it is. There it is. Just gotta
Right?
follow. Just gotta look for the jumping whales.
Yeah, yeah,
But that's it really takes me back to the growth of again. I kind of just enjoy studying business in general. But when talking about the private investors and just the way an industry is going, it's pretty clear that the asphalt paving industry is receiving a lot of attention, and that these I'm not going to say monopolization, but just the what do you call it? Just kind of the consumption of larger entities
yeah.
swallowing up or purchasing the
The
smaller
private
entities.
equity game, you can
Yeah,
call it monopolization, and
y whatever, trying to get as large of a market share as they can. That's really, from my research, that's starting to happen in this industry, which has happened basically started almost through construction, through the formation of steel and the railroads and stuff like that. As
yes.
those were the first industries that really started to swallow it up. But it sounds like a lot of investors are interested in this type of mentality now, which is interesting to me because it's an ancient business. You know what I mean? And in
Yes.
America,
Yeah.
with all this growth and prosperity in the past, that it's just now kind of becoming a thing, but it really does seem to just follow, especially if times are harder on the private sector. You can kind of look in general, anyways, to the government sector to see where additional work might be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Uh, some
Absolutely.
something
And
else.
if
I Go ahead, please.
no, I was just going to say, and if you've got something reputable and established in a brand that people can find and relate with, and you're searchable, uh, online, or just have any kind of presence. I mean, it's amazing how many of these private equity companies are out there that are fishing for people that match what they're looking for in their portfolio, man. And it's I mean, at the prior company there, the last 5, 7, 8 years, we were getting letters all the time and phone calls, and I've even gotten a few now, like just starting. So it's like, man, there's a lot of activity in that market that um, I don't know. It's not for everybody, but I mean, if there's people there that are at the end of their career and don't have a legacy or someone within the family maybe to pass it along to, sometimes that can be a good exit strategy. I'm not saying I'm recommending that you start and build and grow a business and a brand just with that exit strategy in mind. But it is becoming more and more of an option. And you've got some data here. I mean, it, they're offering 4 to 6 times EBITDA on even these smaller companies, and it gets up to 7 to 9 times that uh, EBITDA when the companies get a little larger, maybe a little more established. So I mean, you're talking some big dollars, man, and it's quite interesting. My only fear is that it doesn't take away from the industry in which we all serve and love so much to see all these smaller guys who do great work and do have put their blood, sweat, and tears into this over sometimes generations, to give it all away for a quick check and then see it deteriorate, um, you know the perceived value or the quality or the reputation of that business or the industry as a whole. Can these large firms that are buying up all these companies still operate at the standards in which our industry is creating and adhering to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not even these larger firms, but these larger firms that could be strictly driven by profits and people that don't even really have an interest or prior investment in the industry.
Yeah,
There's a
knowledge. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. There's an article that I came across, and I'll be sure to share it in the links. But I think it's definitely worth a good read, and it is exactly about this. And the article is from Iron Line Advisors, and it just an investment firm, and they talk about how lower to middle market paving businesses, particularly in the southeast U.S., is driven by general market growth, new commercial construction, and maintenance revenue. And this has made the sector very attractive to private equity investors. And just kind of quoting the evaluations, smaller businesses with less than 15 million in revenue can fetch up to 4 to 6 times EBITDA, and larger companies with over 50 million, 7 to 9 times. And that's earnings before taxes, depreciation, and stuff. We're
yeah,
not accountants here, but
right.
we'll get you that update and definition here soon. But I do find it I find it extremely interesting, and it says here also that they're targeting acquisitions of the family and founder-owned businesses with strong market share and diversified client base. Um, so it's very interesting, and I think it's something to keep an eye on. And no doubt, I've heard from not only you but multiple people now that they are getting some offers, and it's really kind of nuts. Uh,
Yeah, that I mean that A in there is amortization. I mean,
hmm,
when you take out taxes, depreciation, amortization on these businesses, even on the smaller ones like that, that gets to be a pretty big number left over at the end. Earnings should be pretty, if you're running a good business, a well-oiled machine kind of business. I mean, that should be a pretty good number. So, you take a multiple of 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 times that, man, it's enticing.
absolutely. I mean, it's got to be. It's got to be. And um, it's don't want to go too far down because this path, because everyone's got their own situation and what's best for them.
That's
But
right, man. Absolutely.
I think it's very interesting nonetheless. And I just want to get back to this one point before we move on to kind of the actual best markets from our research. But something I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about was the availability of materials. I had thought
Yeah.
a bit about a bit about if there was a location fairly close to you, how it might be harder for rural areas to find a plant. But I did not think about the plant's ability to find the actual materials. So
Yeah.
that's pretty interesting. If especially in some of these smaller areas, if we have any listeners out there that kind of battle with that, it's just kind of an interesting idea to me that some of these materials are going to have to be shipped in from a long way away.
Yeah, and it's the more, obviously the further the distance, and then take it a step further than that, the means of transportation of getting that material to said facility. We're lucky here in Louisville because we're on a river, so we get a lot of the sand comes right out of the river that we dredge here locally, and it's readily available. A lot of we're in a hotbed for granite and limestone, in southern Indiana and Kentucky, so we've got access to stone as well. And then the biggest key is we're right on a river, so the stuff we don't aren't able to harvest here exactly locally, we're getting shipped in via barge, which is very economical, very
Hmm.
low. Your fuel costs are lower. Your uh, transfer, think about a barge compared to a semi truck, having to haul this stuff in, and how many trucks that would be. How much more material you can fit onto a barge and get here into our city. So you basically got, there's probably three that I can think of, forms of transportation to get the materials to a plant or a facility. You've got barge or river, waterway system. You've got rail, and then you've got straight up trucking. And as you go further down, from barge down to trucking, that's why when you get out in these rural areas or get away from metropolitan, those prices go way up. It's supply and it's demand. The demand's not nearly as much, and it's so much more difficult and so much more costly to get those raw materials into that area, opposed to somewhere like Louisville that's sitting right here on the Ohio River. People can get material to us from all over the country if we needed them to, um,
Sure, sure.
just down the river channels. So it's
Yeah,
it's interesting, just the difference between Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky, which is just about 60 miles apart. Louisville sitting on a river and Lexington not. Everything having to be delivered in by rail or by truck. Uh, the asphalt is 20-25% more expensive to go in there and
wow,
purchase at a plant, and it's largely due to those transportation costs with getting the materials to the plant.
that is
It's wild.
bananas. And then
Yeah, I
and
mean it's
if you're
the same rock, same liquid asphalt, same kind of sand, but it's how much more did it cost to get it to that facility to make it in the first place? And that's where you see the price go up that much. It's
sure, and with
If
your
it's 60
location,
bucks a ton here in Louisville, it's 80, 85 in Lexington. It's been
I
that way
I had
forever.
no clue. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you okay, so there's uh, you said it's about 60 minutes, 60 miles apart.
60 miles,
So
yeah.
you can almost get to Lexington before it makes sense to even consider purchasing from there in a lot of cases. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's nuts. I
100%.
never thought it would be that much. And then of course, that's the price, and then you also have to pay for the extra trucking and gas and hourly.
And a lot of
You
the
know,
times when we're working, an hour, sometimes even 2 hours outside of Louisville, it makes more sense for us to pay for the extra trucking because it's still cheaper, less expensive, less of a cost to us on our cost of goods sold for that project to haul it out of Louisville at $25 less a ton and pay for an extra four trucks for the job or whatever that might be.
absolutely.
So it's always looking at those factors every time we're looking at projects.
Man, that's great. So, yeah, that's good information there. That's stuff I continue to learn and find interesting. So let's get down to it. What are the best markets in the United States? And though we weren't able to narrow it down to individual cities, we were able to find a lot of research and data that might help us narrow it down just a little bit more. The first then that kept popping up were states like Texas, Florida, Arizona, and California because of the warm climates, as you were talking about, long days, the mild winters, and then the population growth that drives demand for the residential and the commercial side. Now, some of those are starting to level off a little bit. Florida's growth rate slowing down a little bit. The hot areas in Texas are slowing down a little bit. But for the most part, and I have a slight argument to this, it says that Texas, Florida, Arizona, the Sun Belt states makes the most sense. Any surprise there, Kev?
Not really, because the weather is almost so predictable. At least in three out of four of those states, Florida can get rainy, but when you start adding warm for an entire 12 months and then finding pocket, like I look at Arizona, that's no because it's dry there also. So I mean, we're in a market here in Louisville, and we're still in the southeast considered. I mean, we get 200 working days a year. They're probably getting 300, 310,
Absolutely.
and they're not having to run a seasonal business. So it's uh, you know big difference, big
Yeah.
difference.
Where,
And
where,
and and,
please.
and but you've got to have the workload to support that too. Like, um, especially being a startup now, we're having a hard time filling 200 days. I couldn't imagine trying to fill 300 at this point. Now, a couple years back in the other business, could we have filled 300? Maybe. I mean,
Mhm.
we got pretty good at getting a lot done in 200, but would that just been another incentive to grow? I don't know. I don't mind getting a couple months uh, to kind of chill out, but I've got to run my business accordingly. I've got to do 12 months worth of revenue and cover the 12 months worth of expenses in 9 or 10 months worth of billable seasons. So, uh, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah, I
double-edged
would.
sword to some extent, man. But yeah,
Yeah,
no surprise that those Sunbelt states are thriving in this
sure.
industry.
Sure. Yeah, my thought was, to try to argue this point, and the data I wanted to find was how many uh, companies there were, asphalt companies there were per capita. It had just
Yeah.
how big the competition was, and that was the data that I really had trouble getting. I even just wanted to try to do just even some major cities and maybe some mid-major cities, and I found some supporting statistics, but not those directly. But I did want to mention here also that some of the more rapidly growing metropolitan areas were Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Las Vegas, and this is all based on 2023 and early 2024 data.
Yeah.
But the flip side to all that good stuff is that I was thinking, well, of course, like some paving business owners might not be able to work and operate that year round in one of the hardest industries. Two was the market
So yeah.
share, and three
Yeah.
was with the conditions are perfect, the asphalt stays in better shape longer. Now, me not knowing the line items, that ends up not being a very big deal. Um, because here, as it says, states with the harsh winters, though they can get great maintenance programs going, with larger companies that just want to keep things going, and those seasons can be full of patch jobs, things to get it over the winter. But in areas like Minnesota, North Dakota, Maine, and the Northeast, it's a lot harder, a lot shorter, and it turns out may be a little bit more difficult to run an asphalt paving company, even with the lack of competition.
Yeah, it's tough. I got a couple buddies, very close friends of mine that are in central to northern Michigan, and there isn't a lot of competition, and they've become very good at what they do, and they've kind of become the household name in their markets. But it's when they only get 6 months. I mean, like I said a minute ago, you gotta whatever however many months you've gotta you have a year's worth of expenses you've got to cover if you're owning a business. I don't care how you want to slice it. I mean, yes, they may, they're going to drop a little bit in the months you're not performing or producing revenue, but they're still going to exist. So you've got to get very specific with your jobs, with your profitability, with your average job size. If you say I've only got 120 days to work, how much revenue do I need? Do I have to be producing each day to make it through a 12-month calendar? It
Sure.
doesn't, you can't, you got to be strategic when you're in those kind of markets. You can't just go out and be thankful and grateful to be working every day and doing jobs. There's another level of strategy and integration and understanding of your data to really be figuring out, I got 100 days. I gotta produce this much revenue to produce this much gross profit to cover all this stuff for a year-long budget,
Sure,
right?
sure, and no doubt seasonal employees,
Very
and
seasonal.
just trying to find other industries where that might work out as an alternating schedule or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are some extra points that you
And
don't have
and
to
a lot of
consider.
those guys have been as good as they've gotten at it. They're still having to rely on, getting into snow removal or something else in the winter, or which is about the only thing a lot of people can think about doing in the wintertime. They're like, well, I've got these trucks, I've got
Hmm,
a lot of these similar equipment we can use for snow removal. I've got some guys, a couple of my friends have gotten into like the demolition business that they'll do during the off paving months. Just anything to kind of just pay the bills through those months because I mean, it gets so demanding. The people that have figured out how to do it in those northern climates where they've got such a limited season, I mean, it's highly impressive because there's no, having done this for 15, 16 years now, like there's no doubt in my mind how well tuned those operations have to be if they're going to be successful long term.
Sure, sure. A lot of
So
plug and play. A lot.
yeah, I mean
They
it's
have their systems. They have their positions. They just need right people, which I'm sure they're pretty good at keeping them if they're doing a good job.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
got it.
that's
Yeah,
that's another challenge. Think of it, you got to lay somebody off for 6 months.
yeah.
How do you retain your labor force?
It's difficult, and I
Yeah,
just want to throw it in here that this is again based off 2023 statistics, but the Rust Belt and declining industrial areas of some cities. They mention here Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. Uh, it says aging infrastructure requires significant maintenance, and it does strain municipal budgets. I know that just as far as population wise, a lot of people have moved away from those cities and those areas. I do think that areas like Cleveland and maybe Pittsburgh will become perhaps more attractive as people come back down to earth as far as moving and finding a reasonable place to live and all that good stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But I do find it just makes me sad thinking about some of those cities that were so key to American prosperity and
Oh,
success. And, just,
those three were staples. If you were to name, I don't know, five or six, seven cities that helped build this country, literally from nothing to what it is today, those are three of them right there. And it is sad, man, because
yeah, yeah.
that's where the Industrial Revolution started and the modernization of the Americas as we know it, man,
Yeah, I hope
came
there's
from
some.
factories in those cities.
Yeah, I hope there's some company owners in those cities that are like, screw you guys, just with a bunch of pride and doing their thing. So from people of those cities, go get them out there,
Yeah.
and let us know how things are going. Let us know if you're seeing a little bit of a reversal, if you're seeing any kind of trend difference or anything like that, because it is truly interesting to me that especially with the communication we can have, just what we can learn from each other and what's going on and the different opportunities that people have.
Yeah.
I did want to share some just other general statistics here, real quick, that I found. Um, the number of paving businesses in the United States that were reported were all over the place. One of the more reputable sources that
It
I
is.
seem to have found was about 123,000 paving contractors, which is slightly growing over the last 5 years, with Florida, California, and Texas having the most, and with District of Columbia, North Dakota, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Alaska having the least. And
Look,
yep,
look at that. The entire state of North Dakota, 44, Wyoming, 50. I mean,
yeah,
it tells you a lot about the population and just the land mass that exists in those areas
sure,
and the seasonality of it as well.
sure. And
A
then
lot
you
of
have
fall
Delaware at
colds.
106. More
Yeah,
than or close to triple North Dakota, and it's how big of the size? It's just
yeah,
tiny.
yeah, yeah.
So that's interesting. And I did also have a few notes here about the Louisville market. And I just wondered if you could speak to, your market in general. It's definitely a growing market. It's a place where that is very affordable, and it seems like from the research that multi-residential kind of family complexes are what's leading the way there.
Yeah. I mean, Louisville, in our industry, I don't, it's a saturated market. I mean, it just is, and it has been for a long time. And it's a very competitive market, largely in part to some of the way that prices were driven, and it stems back from the 1980s and early 90s, from what I understand. I mean, well before I got into the industry, but there was, uh, call it price shaving, call it, you know, selling material at cost or whatever you want to, watering down the market that happened back in Louisville in the late 80s, early 90s has kind of kept it very, very, very competitive. We've got three, four, five, large whale type of players that produce their own material that are producer installers, providers, and then you've got, man, I don't. We looked on Google the other day. There's probably 20, 25 other contractors within Jefferson County that pop up when you search for them. So, and that's look. That doesn't mean they're all reputable. And
Sure.
thank God for Google and thank God for people at least mostly trending to shop the way they shop today, and that's based on reviews, based on reputation. Word of mouth is still tremendous. I mean, I can't believe how many people I'll go meet with that will share some negative word of mouth about someone they've met with, because it just proves to me how important reputation still is, even in the digital world that we live in. Like that word of mouth stuff is probably still the biggest driver of business. If not, it's right up there neck and neck with digital marketing, media, and things like that. But
I think it's
and
also
look,
the biggest. I think it's also the biggest, and I also think it's the biggest deterrent. Or even it's even bigger.
100%.
It's even bigger if it's a bad experience. They're going
It's
to tell more
even
people.
it's Yeah, you have a 0% closing ratio if you have someone that's giving you a bad word of mouth referral.
Yeah,
You can almost, if it's not 100% no, it's at least 99.5%
yeah,
no,
they're
you
being
know.
polite.
And so, and look, being a startup, again, we've played with this, with our marketing, with our research, with the data we're getting in, and we're getting outside of Louisville Metro and Jefferson County and into some of these neighboring counties that have received that the populations are growing. Like the cities and towns and counties and communities around Louisville are not small by any means anymore. You start getting a little further out into the state, it starts getting a little more rural, or a little more small town feel, and they've never had anybody service their paving needs. So we're stretching out of this market a little bit. Um, not I mean, just kind of testing the waters, seeing where the business is. I don't want Look, I've been doing this too long. I'm 43 years old. Like, I don't want to go bid a driveway that six other companies are bidding on, because uh, yes, I know I can provide an extreme value and I should be that person's choice. And now I'm obviously biased to that, but they're still looking at numbers at the end of the day. And I'm probably not going to be the cheapest.
Sure.
We want to capitalize on a value driven approach. And again, we've got we've got goals, we've got data, we've got a budget we're trying to back these numbers into. We can't go around competing with everybody at bargain pricing.
Yep.
Like, we'll starve to death. We'll never get this thing off the ground.
Yep. And plus,
So
basically, no matter, unless it's word of mouth, no matter what lead source you use, it's going to be more expensive for those highly competitive areas too. So
yeah,
it's more
absolutely.
expensive in time and resources, and as you said, the numbers as far as the price, but also just the numbers as far as sales competitors that are throwing their hat into the ring. So, um,
100%. I could stay in Jefferson County all day long and probably go look at 8 or 10 jobs a day, and maybe get a couple of them, or we can get real selective on the markets we want to target that are well within our service areas still, where maybe we're only looking at 5, 10, 15 projects a week, but we're getting over half of them or
absolutely,
more. I mean,
absolutely.
I bet if you look at our closing, I haven't looked at it in the last week or two there in our CRM, but I bet our closing ratio, I mean, it's high.
Yeah,
It's high.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and also just kind of going back to you know one thing kind of trickling down for the other as we kind of mess around with advertising more closer to that Lexington market, I'm realizing, with all the more expensive everything else overhead, that market is also extremely competitive, and that's expensive. It's much more expensive for some, whether it be general marketing strategy or not wanting to travel. There are just a lot of companies that don't want to do it, and we see it as a really good opportunity.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
And so, just kind of, I wanted to share some of the resources that we will be giving everyone in the episode description. There's going to be some screenshots, states with the biggest change in home construction, and then that also goes for large and medium-sized metros. We're going to link to the housing market construction article that I was mentioning, and then also some industry growth data. Both of those articles I found very interesting, so check those out in the show notes. Um, Kevin, was there anything kind of we've been talking about here that kind of sparked another thought that you didn't get to, or something else that's eating your brain on this topic?
Um, no, not in particular. I mean, I love market research. I love understanding the numbers. I love exploring data. I love uh, having information like this at my fingertips as a business owner so that we can strategize on where we need to be putting our resources. Um, like I just said, we could be spinning our wheels here in Jefferson County against 30 other competitors, or we could go 10 miles over the county line and go out looking at potentially even better projects and only be maybe dealing with a competitor or two. So like understanding, and I think if I wanted to stress one thing, like because I've done this both ways now. Like when I started the first business or took over the other business, it was all on inspiration, fuel, piss, vinegar, pride, ego. Let's get the sales, let's get the sales, let's get the sales by any means necessary. To now, yes, we still need to get sales by means necessary, but it's not by any means necessary anymore because and I don't know how to streamline that for folks. I don't know how to explain that to folks because it's
Mm.
almost like getting to a point in your career as an entrepreneur where you understand the value of data and can start understanding numbers and really start using it to your advantage to where you're making decisions. Every decision you make within your business has a return on investment kind of mentality because you have data upon data upon data. Um, we just have an opportunity this time to take a totally different approach because that's we're running a business by the numbers, by the data. We're not running a business by pride, ego, self will, willpower. What like those. And I'm saying you got to have those things if you're going to be an entrepreneur in a business. And like I'm not saying you don't possess those qualities still, but like
Sure.
let's not let those emotions run the business for you. Let's let the data run the business for you and take all that good data and then put your piss and vinegar into that and roll with that,
Yeah, focused piss and vinegar.
Focused, yes.
Yeah,
Focused.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's great stuff. It in a strange way, it's more comforting and relaxing because
It is.
you're not just, you know, you're not just grinding for grinding's sake. You know what I mean? You're not just
Yeah.
there's no I mean, as you named all the positive purposes. So I mean, it really is fun to have informed decisions and then watch one by one the decisions either work or not work, and then keep using the ones that are working. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
definitely
don't
different.
misunderstand that it's still not stressful. But you just said it like it's taken that grind and exhaustion. Like
Yeah,
I feel like we're not wasting the time and resources just on a whim anymore, or
yeah,
because we're trying to force it. Like I've almost become kind of okay with being patient and trusting the process. And I do understand our data so well and what our approach is and our marketing strategy that it's all gonna work out because
yeah.
we're doing all the right things. And when we find something we're not doing right, we correct it because we're watching it all the time. We're not
Sure.
just out there freaking gunslinging, trying to grow a business by doing as much activity as we possibly can. Because and maybe it's my age. I don't know. I'm not 28, 29 this time starting a business, but like I don't have the energy to take a whole bunch of missteps.
Yeah,
I don't have the time, the energy. My family doesn't want to put up with a me that is exhausted and worn out and at wit's end and just grinding, 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 grinding. And I'm not saying I'm not working my ass off, and we're not working our asses off trying to get this thing off the ground, but we're being tactical. We're using our information, and we're doing it. We're doing it the best way we know how.
absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely an enjoyable process, especially this time around, and not just staying busy, but focusing on progress instead of
Yes,
being busy. So
yes.
that's great stuff, and it's definitely
Smarter, not harder.
that's
In my
right. Trying to develop individual
actually
relationships
meaning
and
it.
get out there and get those jobs that make sense, rather
Yeah,
than just the job that's keeping your feet on the hot pavement.
yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
I've paved enough stuff for practice in my career, dude. Like, trust me.
Well, thanks, Kev. And
Yes, sir.
if you, the listener, want to keep this party going, visit paveitforwardllc.com or find us on YouTube or Instagram at Pave It Forward LLC. More resources coming like this soon, including announcements, industry questionnaires, and deeper dives into topics like this one you heard today. We're going to start running some industry quizzes immediately. They will have already been run by the time this comes out. So, this has been the Pave It Forward Podcast, everyone. Stick around for episodes you may have missed or catch us on our socials at Pave It Forward LLC. For now, we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for your time, Kev. Appreciate you.